World War I. It's a name that conjures up images of muddy trenches, relentless artillery barrages, and young men facing unimaginable horrors. It's a period of history that's both fascinating and terrifying, a testament to human resilience and a stark reminder of the destructive power of conflict. This wasn't just some minor scuffle. This was a global showdown that reshaped the world map and forever changed the course of human history. But fear not, dear reader. This isn't going to be a dry, boring lecture filled with endless dates and statistics. We're going to delve into the thick of it, exploring the key battles, the larger-than-life characters, and the shocking twists and turns that make this period so captivating. Think of it as a history lesson, but with a dash of humor and a sprinkle of "you won't believe this" moments. So buckle up, grab your imaginary gas mask, and prepare to journey back to the early 20th century. We're about to dive headfirst into the world of alliances, empires, and the chaos that was World War I. It's a story of bravery and sacrifice, of technological innovation and strategic blunders, and of the enduring human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way, because as the saying goes, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And trust me, you don't want to repeat this one. It all began in Sarajevo. Picture this. June 28, 1914, a bright sunny day in the Balkans. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting Sarajevo with his wife, Sophie. They're riding in an open car, waving to the crowds, when a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip steps out from the crowd and fires 2 shots. Boom! The Archduke and his wife are killed instantly. Now you might think, okay, so some royal got assassinated. Tragic, but why did it trigger a global war? Well, the thing is, this wasn't just any assassination. It was the spark that ignited a powder keg of simmering tensions and complex alliances across Europe. Austria-Hungary, furious over the assassination, blamed Serbia and issued an ultimatum that was practically impossible to meet. Within weeks, the dominoes began to fall. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, Serbia's ally, mobilized its troops. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia, and then on France, Russia's ally. And just for good measure, Germany decided to invade Belgium, a neutral country, to get to France quicker. Talk about bad neighbors. By August 4, 1914, most of Europe was at war. It was a tangled web of alliances, betrayals, and old grudges, all culminating in a conflict that would engulf the world. And little did they know, this was just the beginning. The early days of the war were marked by rapid German advances. They swept through Belgium and into France, their sights set on Paris. The French army, caught off guard, scrambled to defend their capital. It was a desperate situation, with the fate of France hanging in the balance. But then, something remarkable happened. In September 1914, the French and British forces launched a counteroffensive along the Marne River. It was a bloody, chaotic battle, fought with incredible ferocity on both sides. But in the end, the Allies managed to halt the German advance and push them back. Paris was saved, for now. The Battle of the Marne was a turning point in the war. It shattered the German dream of a quick victory and set the stage for a long, drawn-out conflict. It also marked the beginning of trench warfare, a brutal and static form of combat that would come to define the Western Front. So, cheers to the Marne for saving Paris and for inadvertently introducing the world to the joys of trench foot and endless shelling. Imagine this. Miles upon miles of muddy ditches stretching across the battlefields of France and Belgium. These were the trenches, the defining feature of World War I. Life in the trenches was, to put it mildly, unpleasant. Soldiers on both sides faced a daily onslaught of shelling, sniper fire, and the constant threat of enemy attack. The trenches were cramped, filthy, and infested with rats. Disease was rampant, and the stench of death hung heavy in the air. Soldiers spent their days huddled in dugouts, trying to stay dry and avoid getting blown to bits. It was a miserable existence, punctuated by moments of sheer terror when the order came to go over the top and charge into no man's land. But amidst the horrors of trench warfare, there were also moments of camaraderie, humor, and even beauty. Soldiers formed strong bonds with their comrades, sharing jokes, stories, and the occasional cigarette. They wrote letters home, sang songs, and created art, finding ways to maintain their humanity in the face of unimaginable brutality. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, finding hope and even laughter in the darkest of places. 1916 was a year of brutal attrition on the Western Front. It was a year of massive offensives, staggering casualties, and little strategic gain. Two battles stand out: Verdun and the Somme. Verdun, a fortress city in northeastern France, became a symbol of French resilience. The Germans launched a massive offensive in February 1916, aiming to bleed France white. The battle raged for months, with both sides suffering horrific losses. But despite the relentless German assault, the French held on, refusing to yield. Then came the Somme, a British-led offensive launched in July 1916. The goal was to break through the German lines and relieve the pressure on Verdun. The battle began with a massive artillery bombardment, followed by a wave of British soldiers advancing across no man's land. It was a disaster. The Germans were well prepared, and the British suffered heavy losses on the first day alone. Both Verdun and the Somme became synonymous with the futility of trench warfare. They were battles of attrition, where the goal was to inflict as many casualties as possible on the enemy, regardless of the cost. It was a brutal and senseless way to fight a war, and it left scars on the landscape and the psyches of those who fought there that would never fully heal. While the Western Front was bogged down in trench warfare, the Eastern Front was a more fluid and chaotic affair. It was a vast theater of war, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, and it involved massive armies clashing in brutal battles. Russia, despite its vast size and manpower, was poorly equipped and led. They suffered a series of defeats against the Germans and Austro-Hungarians, losing millions of men in the process. But the Russians also had moments of brilliance, like the Brusilov offensive in 1916, which inflicted heavy losses on the Austro-Hungarians. The Eastern Front was also marked by political upheaval. The Tsarist regime, already weakened by corruption and inefficiency, was further destabilized by the war. In 1917, a revolution toppled the Tsar and brought the Bolsheviks to power. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, promised peace, land, and bread, and they signed a separate peace treaty with Germany in 1918, withdrawing Russia from the war. The Eastern Front was a crucial part of World War I, and its impact was felt far beyond the battlefields. Russia's withdrawal allowed Germany to transfer troops to the Western Front, while the Bolshevik Revolution sent shockwaves through Europe and beyond. For the first few years of the war, the United States remained neutral. President Woodrow Wilson campaigned on a platform of peace and neutrality, and most Americans were content to stay out of the European conflict. But events in 1917 would change that. Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, which targeted civilian ships, angered the Americans. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, a British passenger liner that carried American citizens, further fueled anti-German sentiment. And then came the Zimmermann Telegram, a secret German communication that proposed an alliance with Mexico against the United States. The Zimmermann Telegram, along with continued German submarine attacks, pushed the United States to declare war on Germany in April 1917. The entry of the United States, with its vast resources and manpower, tipped the balance of power in favor of the Allies. It was a game changer, and it ultimately helped to secure Allied victory. By 1918, both sides were exhausted. Years of war had taken a heavy toll on the economies, morale, and manpower of all the combatants. But the Allies, bolstered by the arrival of American troops, launched a series of offensives that would finally break the German lines. The 100 Days Offensive, a series of coordinated Allied attacks, began in August 1918. The Germans, facing relentless pressure and dwindling resources, were pushed back on all fronts. Their morale plummeted and their armies began to disintegrate. By November 1918, Germany was on the verge of collapse. The Kaiser abdicated, and a new German government sued for peace. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed, bringing the fighting to an end. The Great War was over. At 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, the guns fell silent. After 4 long years of bloodshed and destruction, the fighting was over. The armistice, signed in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, marked the end of World War I. News of the armistice spread like wildfire, sparking celebrations in Allied countries around the world. People poured into the streets, cheering, singing, and waving flags. It was a moment of immense relief and joy, a collective sigh of relief after years of anxiety and grief. But the celebrations were also tinged with sadness. Millions had died in the war, and many more were wounded or scarred for life. The world was forever changed by the conflict, and the scars of war would take generations to heal. In the aftermath of the war, the victorious Allies gathered in Paris to negotiate peace treaties with the defeated Central Powers. The most important of these was the Treaty of Versailles, signed with Germany in June 1919. The Treaty of Versailles was harsh. It imposed heavy reparations on Germany, stripped it of territory, and limited its military capabilities. It also included a war guilt clause, which forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for starting the war. The Treaty of Versailles was controversial from the start. Many Germans felt it was unfair and humiliating, and it sowed the seeds of resentment that would contribute to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the outbreak of World War II. World War I was a watershed moment in human history. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, and it left a lasting legacy on the world. Millions died, empires crumbled, and the political landscape of Europe was forever altered. The war also accelerated technological innovation, leading to the development of new weapons, communication systems, and medical treatments. But these advancements came at a terrible cost, and they foreshadowed the even greater horrors that would unfold in World War II. World War I was called the war to end all wars, but sadly, it didn't live up to its name. The seeds of future conflict were sown in the Treaty of Versailles, and the world would be plunged into another global war just 2 decades later. The lessons of World War I, though hard won, were not enough to prevent history from repeating itself.